Do you have anything to say for yourself, Emma? Victoria's voice thundered through the already suffocating mansion. Emma cowered, unable to meet her stepmother's eyes. The 16-year-old girl stared at the marble floor, her hands trembling as they clutched the hem of her designer dress. Shameless, Victoria sneered, her gaze devoid of empathy. So young, and already bringing disgrace to this family. How could your father have married someone who raised such a disappointment? I didn't mean to, Emma stammered, unable to hold back her tears. Didn't mean to? Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. Do you know how much embarrassment you've brought upon the Blackwood name? Do you have any idea what people in our social circles will say? How can you even show your face at the country club anymore? Victoria continued her tirade. Why waste my breath on her? A girl like that doesn't deserve to live under this roof. Let her deal with the consequences herself. No, please, Victoria, I'm begging you. Emma lifted her tear-streaked face to plead with her stepmother, only to be met with a gaze as cold as ice. What are you still standing there for? Get out. Victoria stood abruptly, pointing toward the grand entrance. It felt as if the ground had fallen out from beneath Emma's feet. She staggered back a few steps, her wide eyes filled with fear. I have nowhere to go. I don't know what to do, she whispered. That's your problem. Don't ever come back here. Victoria turned her back on her, as if she were a stranger. You're right. Keeping her here would only bring more shame to our family, Victoria said, her voice steady but brimming with disdain. Outside, a few neighbors from the wealthy Beverly Hills community had gathered, peering curiously toward the mansion. Their prying eyes and murmurs buzzed like daggers in Emma's back. Leave already, Victoria shouted, her patience gone. Emma turned and ran, tears streaming down her face. The California sun beat down mercilessly as she wandered aimlessly down the pristine streets, her designer shoes clicking against the sidewalk. Get out of here. This isn't a place for you. A security guard with a harsh expression blocked the entrance of a luxury hotel where Emma had sought shelter. I just need a place to stay for one night, Emma pleaded, her voice choked with tears. Get lost. I don't want any trouble, he said firmly, leaving Emma standing alone under the scorching sun. She stumbled toward a nearby public park, the cold benches her last refuge. As the evening approached, Emma curled up on a bench, clutching her stomach as if to protect the tiny glimmer of hope growing within her. Hey girl, stop right there, a coarse voice called out, followed by malicious laughter. Emma turned to see three figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes filled with menace. What are you doing out here at this hour? We're looking for some fun, and you're perfect for it, one of them sneered, stepping closer with a wicked grin. Emma couldn't speak, only backing away in fear. Don't run. Where do you think you're going? Emma bolted, her tears blending with the sweat as she ran blindly. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. The uneven pavement threatened to trip her with every step, but the instinct to survive kept her moving. The sound of footsteps closing in was deafening, but by sheer luck, Emma darted into a narrow alley and lost them. She collapsed, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Why? Why does everyone hate me? Emma whispered, her voice drowned by the traffic noise. That night, Emma curled up under a tree in the park. The cold Los Angeles night showed no mercy, the chills seeping into her bones. She didn't know when she had fallen asleep. In her dreams, Victoria appeared, but instead of love, she was filled with scorn and indifference. Emma, you deserve this. Victoria's voice echoed like thunder, jolting her awake. Emma opened her eyes, her body aching with the cold. A high fever clouded her mind, and her lips were pale from the chill. Am I going to die here? The thought flitted through her mind, filling her with dread. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but Emma no longer had the strength to resist. Everything blurred before her eyes. Child, what are you doing here? A warm, elderly voice broke through the haze. Emma vaguely made out the silhouette of a woman leaning over her, a large umbrella shielding them both from the morning dew. I. Emma couldn't muster the strength to respond and collapsed into the stranger's arms. Don't be afraid, poor child. I'll help you, the woman said, her aged hands gently lifting Emma. Who are you? Emma murmured, her eyes closing from exhaustion. I'm just an old cafe owner, but you can't stay out here like this. Eleanor carried Emma to her small cafe on the corner of Sunset Boulevard. The place was modest but warm, filled with the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee, a stark contrast to the cold outside. "Sit here, I'll get you some hot chocolate," Eleanor said, placing Emma on a chair. Her gaze was full of compassion as she looked at the well-dressed but shivering girl. For the first time in days, Emma felt a glimmer of warmth from a stranger's kindness, yet deep down, the pain and hurt remained like an unhealed wound. The next morning, Emma awoke on an old leather chair in Eleanor's café. Her head still throbbed from the fever she'd battled the night before. The aroma of freshly baked pastries teased her senses, and her empty stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in 2 days. "You're awake. Here, have some warm soup," Eleanor said gently, setting down a bowl of soup and a small piece of bread on the table. Her eyes were full of concern as she looked at the frail girl with a pale face. "Thank you," Emma whispered, her voice weak, but the weariness in her eyes remained. She wasn't used to kindness, especially from a stranger. "Don't worry, I don't need to know what happened, but it's clear you need help," Eleanor said, her voice steady but comforting. "Eat, then rest some more. We'll talk later." Emma picked up the bread, her hands trembling from hunger and fatigue. But as soon as it touched her lips, she felt a lump in her throat. The harsh words of Victoria echoed in her mind. She put the bread down, tears silently streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" Eleanor asked, sitting beside her. I don't deserve to eat. I'm the disgrace of my family," Emma sobbed. Eleanor remained silent for a moment, then gently took Emma's frail hands in her own. "Listen to me, child. No one deserves to be treated like that. I don't know what you've been through, but I know you're a good girl, and you deserve to live." With Eleanor's help, Emma began assisting in the small cafe. Although the work wasn't too demanding, the judgmental stares of the Beverly Hills customers made Emma uneasy. "Who's that girl?" a woman whispered to Eleanor, her expression filled with suspicion. "She doesn't seem right. Don't let her ruin your reputation." Eleanor dismissed her sharply. "What I do is none of your business. If you don't like it, find another cafe." But not everyone was as kind-hearted as Eleanor. One afternoon, as Emma was wiping the tables, a man in an expensive suit walked in. It was Harrison, the owner of the nearby luxury boutique, notorious for being snobbish and nosy. "Eleanor, I need a word with you," Harrison said, casting a disapproving glance at Emma. "What is it, Harrison?" "That girl." He pointed directly at Emma. "Do you know who she is? I heard she was kicked out of the Blackwood mansion for doing something shameful. Keeping her here is asking for trouble." Emma kept her head down, trying not to cry, but the cruel words stabbed her heart like daggers. Eleanor straightened her back, her gaze steely. "Harrison, if you have nothing better to do, then leave. This girl hasn't harmed anyone. But you should think about your reputation. Who would want to buy coffee from a cafe harboring someone like her?" Harrison pressed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Get out of here, Harrison, and don't come back," Eleanor said firmly, pointing to the door. Her unwavering gaze made it clear she wouldn't tolerate anyone hurting Emma further. However, rumors started spreading throughout the upscale neighborhood. "That Blackwood girl is living at Eleanor's cafe." The whispers and scornful looks grew increasingly unbearable. One evening, as Emma stepped outside to take out the trash, she was cornered by a group of young men from the neighborhood. "Hey girl, who do you think you are living here?" A rough-looking man named Carlos shouted. I just want to live peacefully," Emma stammered, stepping back. "Peacefully? Someone like you wants peace? You've already disgraced this place," Carlos snarled before shoving Emma hard, causing her to fall to the ground. "Enough!" Eleanor's voice rang out from the cafe's entrance. She rushed over and helped Emma to her feet. "If you don't know how to behave, then don't come here again." Carlos smirked. "Fine, but don't blame us when your cafe gets boycotted." Eleanor ushered Emma back inside, her elderly hands trembling with anger. "Don't listen to them, child. You've done nothing wrong." But Emma remained silent, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know how much more she could endure. The mounting pressure forced Eleanor to close the cafe for a few days to avoid further trouble. During that time, Emma tried to find work to help Eleanor, but no one would hire her. "We don't need anyone else," said a restaurant owner, his contemptuous eyes glancing at her belly. "Please give me a chance. I'll work hard," Emma begged, only to be met with a dismissive shake of the head. Going from place to place, Emma began to feel invisible, rejected by the entire world. One afternoon when she returned to the cafe, she found Eleanor sitting forlornly at the table, a pile of bills stacked in front of her. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, worried. Eleanor sighed. "I don't know if I can keep this cafe open much longer. People are threatening to stop buying from me if you stay here." "I'll leave," Emma said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to bring you any more trouble." Eleanor looked at Emma, her eyes filled with pain. "You foolish girl, you have nowhere else to go. I won't let you end up on the streets again." But in Emma's heart, the thought of leaving Eleanor grew stronger. She didn't want the kind woman to suffer because of her. That night, after tossing and turning, Emma woke up with tired eyes and watched Eleanor, who was still working tirelessly despite her age. Filled with gratitude, Emma also felt an overwhelming guilt. She knew her presence only added to Eleanor's burdens. "I'm going to find a job. I don't want you to feel this pressure anymore," Emma said quietly as Eleanor prepared morning pastries. "I've told you, Emma, you don't need to worry. This is your home, and you're not going anywhere," Eleanor replied, her tone firm but unable to hide her exhaustion. Still, Emma was determined. She left the cafe and went from shop to shop in the neighborhood, looking for work. Her heart sank with each judgmental stare and dismissive shake of the head. "Are you looking for a job? How laughable," scoffed a middle-aged woman named Carmen, the owner of a jewelry boutique. "We don't hire people like you. Do yourself a favor and leave before you dirty my store." Emma bit her lip, holding back tears. She bowed her head in thanks and quietly walked away. Each step felt heavier as she sank further into a world that seemed determined to reject her. That afternoon, as Emma returned from distributing flyers on the street for a meager amount of money, she heard shouting from the nearby upscale shopping center. "She stole my purse. There, that pregnant girl." An elderly woman, red-faced with anger, pointed straight at Emma. A crowd began to gather, their curious and judgmental eyes all fixed on her. "No, I didn't do it. I didn't take anything," Emma cried, tears streaming down her face. She stepped back, but two security guards in the crowd stepped forward to block her way. "Search her bag," someone suggested, their voice menacing. "No, please don't." Emma clutched her bag tightly, but her strength was no match, and a guard ripped it from her hands. They rummaged through Emma's bag, but found nothing. The accusing woman, now flustered, tried to cover her embarrassment. "She must have hidden it somewhere else, but someone like her surely isn't innocent." Emma stood frozen, her whole body trembling with a mix of anger and fear. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement with the woman's baseless accusations. "Get out of here before I call the police," the woman shouted, pointing at Emma. Emma turned and ran, tears streaming down her cheeks. She couldn't understand why people were so cruel just because she was different, just because she carried a tiny life inside her. The whole world seemed intent on crushing her spirit. When Emma returned to the cafe, Eleanor was waiting with a worried expression. "What happened, child? Why are you crying like this?" Emma could no longer hold it in. She collapsed into Eleanor's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't do anything wrong, but they still hate me. They treat me like trash. I can't take it anymore." Eleanor gently stroked Emma's hair, trying to comfort her. "You foolish child, you must stay strong. Don't let them break you." But Emma only shook her head, the pain and despair deeply embedded in her soul. The next day, Eleanor had to leave the cafe to meet the landlord about overdue rent. Emma stayed behind, trying to work but unable to shake her unease. Carlos and the neighborhood boys' threats still haunted her. While Emma was cleaning a table, the cafe door suddenly swung open. Carlos and two of his friends entered, their faces full of mischief. "Hey there, little rich girl. How's the cafe doing today?" Carlos sneered. "What do you want?" Emma asked, trying to stay calm. "What do we want?" "Oh, we're just checking in on you. I heard old lady Eleanor is out, so it's just you here, right?" Carlos smirked, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Please leave. This isn't a place for trouble," Emma said, her voice trembling. Carlos laughed loudly. "Trouble? We're just here to help. But with that attitude, maybe you don't want any help." He stepped closer, his eyes filled with sinister intent. "But hey, do you think the baby in your belly will have a good life?" Sophia backed away in fear, instinctively wrapping her arms around her stomach to protect the child. "Go away. I'll call the police." "Oh, go ahead," Carlos said mockingly. "But do you think the police will believe you?" A girl like you with no real family? Emma couldn't respond. She stood frozen, her entire body trembling with fear and anger. At that moment, a familiar voice rang out from the doorway. "Get out of here immediately." Eleanor appeared, holding a mop, her sharp eyes fixed on Carlos and his friends. Carlos smirked. "Fine, but remember this, old lady. Your cafe won't stay safe for long." He left, but his threats lingered in the air, deepening Emma's despair. After chasing the boys away, Eleanor sat down beside Emma, her eyes full of sympathy. But Emma kept her head down, clutching her stomach and whispering, "I don't know how I can keep going." "You must keep going, Emma," Eleanor said firmly. "You're not just living for yourself. You're living for the child inside you. Don't let them win." But deep down, Emma felt as though everything was slipping out of her control. She didn't know how much more she could endure. Emma woke up after a night full of nightmares. Although Eleanor's small cafe was warm and cozy, the sense of safety it provided was slowly eroding under the weight of hostile stares and cruel gossip from the neighborhood. "Emma, take the day off today. Don't go outside," Eleanor said as she prepared dough for pastries. She had noticed Emma growing increasingly withdrawn, her eyes constantly reflecting worry and fear. "I can't just sit still, Eleanor. I need to do something to help you," Emma murmured, fiddling with a cleaning cloth. But deep inside, she was terrified of stepping outside and facing the world full of scornful gazes. "You silly girl, don't worry about me. You need to take care of yourself first," Eleanor said, her tone gentle but firm. Even so, Emma was determined. That afternoon, while running errands to buy some supplies for Eleanor, Emma encountered Isabella, a middle-aged woman who sold flowers at the corner market. Isabella was well known for stirring up trouble and gossiping. "Well, Emma, you're still here, huh?" Isabella said mockingly as she spotted Emma hesitantly approaching her stall. "I just want to buy some flowers," Emma said softly, avoiding Isabella's gaze. "You still have the nerve to show your face around here. I thought you'd have disappeared by now," Isabella continued, her tone full of contempt. The people around began to take notice, their curious eyes turning toward Emma. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just need a few things." Emma stepped back, trying to avoid the daggers of judgment stabbing at her soul. "You think you're not causing trouble? With that belly, you've disgraced this entire neighborhood," Isabella snapped, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't say that. I just want to live in peace," Emma said, her voice trembling. But her plea only seemed to anger Isabella further. "Peace? Someone like you wants peace? You're just a child who couldn't control herself, and now you expect everyone else to deal with the shame you bring," Isabella shouted, drawing laughter and ridicule from the surrounding crowd. Emma couldn't take it anymore. She turned and ran, leaving behind the jeers and laughter. Each step felt heavier, as if she were carrying the weight of the world's disdain. That evening, as Emma was cleaning up the cafe, the door suddenly swung open. 3 unfamiliar men stepped in, their faces menacing. Emma immediately recognized one of them as Carlos, who had threatened her before. "Where's Eleanor?" Carlos asked, his voice cold. "She's not here," Emma said, trying to keep her composure. Carlos smirked. "Good, then we'll just talk to you." He moved closer to Emma, his gaze threatening. "You think you can live here peacefully? We already told you this place doesn't welcome you." "Please, I just want to work. I don't want to cause any trouble," Emma said, her voice pleading. "Trouble? You are trouble. Ever since you showed up, this neighborhood has been full of rumors. We've lost customers because of this cafe sheltering you," Carlos shouted, slamming his hand down on the counter. Emma flinched and backed away in fear. The 2 men with him began tossing everything off the counter onto the floor. Freshly baked pastries fell and crumbled. Coffee and ingredients spilled everywhere. "Stop. Please don't do this," Emma cried, tears streaming down her face. But Carlos only laughed. "This is your lesson. Get out of here before things get worse." He and his companions left, leaving Emma amidst the wreckage. She collapsed onto the floor, her trembling hands picking up broken pieces of pastries as tears flowed freely down her cheeks. When Eleanor returned, she was horrified to see the state of the cafe. "What happened here?" I can't stay here anymore, Eleanor," Emma said, her voice choking with tears. "I'm only bringing you trouble." Eleanor gripped Emma's shoulders tightly, her eyes filled with determination. "You're not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Emma knew deep down that Eleanor was growing more and more weary, and she couldn't bear the feeling of being a burden any longer. 2 days later, Eleanor received a notice from the landlord. The cafe would be repossessed if she didn't pay the overdue rent within a week. She tried to hide her worry from Emma, but the sadness in her eyes was impossible to conceal. "I'll leave, Eleanor," Emma said, tears welling up. "If I'm not here, maybe people will leave you alone." "You're not going anywhere, Emma," Eleanor said firmly. "I've told you, this is your home." But Emma knew her presence had ruined everything good Eleanor had. That night, when everything was quiet, Emma stared at the ceiling, her heart heavy with pain. "I have to leave for her sake and for my babies." She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the tiny life moving inside. "I'm sorry, little one, but I can't stay here forever." The next morning, Emma woke up earlier than usual. She packed the few belongings she had into an old bag, looking at Eleanor still sound asleep in the corner of the room. Emma fought back tears. She couldn't let her suffer any longer. She wrote a short note and left it on the table. "Dear Eleanor, I am so grateful for everything you've done for me, but I can't stay here and cause you more trouble. I will find somewhere else to live, and I hope people will stop pressuring you. I love you very much. Emma." Taking one last look, Emma placed her hand on her stomach. "Little one, we have to be strong because no one else will help us." She stepped outside, quietly closing the door behind her, leaving the cafe in silence. Emma wandered the streets, eventually finding a cheap motel on the outskirts of Los Angeles where no one cared who she was. But with the little money she had, she could only afford a few nights. Room number 7. "Don't bother me if you can't pay up," the manager, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, said curtly as she tossed Emma the key. The room was small, dark, and damp. Emma sat on the bed, tears threatening to fall as she thought of Eleanor and the warmth of the cafe. But now it was just her and her baby. "We'll be okay," Emma whispered to herself, though she didn't believe it. On her first day at the motel, Emma went out looking for work, but every place she approached rejected her outright. "No vacancies. You're too young. We don't want trouble." The familiar words stabbed at Emma's heart. She knew her growing belly made her an easy target for judgment and rejection. When she returned, she found a group of children from the motel gathered near her door, pointing and laughing. "Look at her belly. It's like a big balloon," one boy shouted, and the others roared with laughter. "She must be a bad person if her family kicked her out," another added with cruel delight. "Stop it. You can't say that," Emma tried to explain, but her protests only made them laugh louder at her helplessness. That night, Emma lay in the dark room, holding her belly, trying to lull both herself and her baby to sleep. But the echo of their mocking laughter and hateful words played over and over in her mind like an unending nightmare. The next morning, Emma tried to leave early to avoid seeing anyone, but Dolores was already waiting outside her door, her face cold and accusatory. "You stole from me, didn't you?" Dolores said loudly, her tone sharp. "No, I didn't take anything." Emma stepped back in shock. "I would never steal." "Then why is the money in my drawer missing since you arrived?" Dolores crossed her arms, her voice growing harsher. "I don't know. I swear I didn't take it." Emma's voice cracked with desperation, her eyes filling with tears. "Don't make excuses. You have 24 hours to pay or get out of here." "I won't keep a thief in my motel," Dolores shouted, drawing the attention of the other tenants. Emma could only lower her head, tears streaming down her face. The accusations made everyone in the motel whisper among themselves. It felt as though the entire world was against her. That night, when Emma returned to her room, she found the door wide open. Inside, everything was ransacked. Her meager belongings scattered across the floor. "Is anyone here?" Emma called out, her voice trembling, but there was no response. She stepped inside and saw that her small pouch of money was gone. "No, no, this can't be," Emma cried out, tears streaming down her face. She ran out to find Dolores to report the theft, but before she could explain, Dolores cut her off. "It's you again. Don't try to blame anyone else. You did this to yourself," Dolores shouted, leaving Emma speechless and unable to defend herself. Overcome with helplessness, Emma quietly returned to her room. She knew no one believed her. No one would stand by her. In the cold, dark room, Emma clutched her belly and sobbed. "I'm sorry, little one. I couldn't protect you. Where will we go now?" What are we going to do? But there was no answer. All Emma could hear was the sound of traffic seeping through the thin walls, a cruel reminder of her complete isolation. The next morning, Emma left the motel quietly, carrying her few belongings in a worn fabric bag. The sound of the keys jangling as she returned them to Dolores was met with indifference. The middle-aged woman didn't even look at her, only waving her off. Emma kept her head down, feeling the cold stares from those around her. She wandered through familiar streets that now felt alien, as though every path rejected her presence. Her stomach growled with hunger, her legs ached, and she leaned against an old brick wall, gasping for breath. The hot Los Angeles sun cut through her thin clothes, leaving her dizzy and exhausted. She reached an old shopping center where, in the past, a few kind strangers had given her leftover food. But today, no one seemed to notice her. Emma stood by the food court, lit with bright lights, the smell of freshly cooked meals making her stomach twist in hunger. She hesitated, summoning her courage. "Excuse me, do you have any leftover food?" Emma asked softly, her voice hoarse from the heat and exhaustion. The woman behind the counter glanced at Emma with disdain. "I don't have anything for you. Go somewhere else." Emma bowed her head in thanks, despite the humiliation flooding her chest. She walked away, her eyes fixed on the ground, unwilling to meet the judgmental gazes of those around her. At a small park, Emma sat on a bench, cradling her belly as silent tears streamed down her face. "Little one, I'm sorry. What did I do wrong for us to suffer like this?" Suddenly, a group of children passed by, their laughter jolting Emma from her thoughts. A young boy in the group stopped, staring at Emma's belly, and called out loudly, "Look, she's so fat." The group burst into laughter. Another child threw a small stone in Emma's direction, but she only bowed her head and endured it. Tears continued to roll down her cheeks as her heart twisted in anguish at the cruelty of the world around her. As night fell, Emma continued to wander aimlessly. She found a secluded corner among abandoned buildings and curled up to shield herself from the cool night air. But even with her eyes shut tight, sleep wouldn't come. The growling of her empty stomach and the sounds of the city through the darkness seemed to remind her that she had been utterly abandoned by the world. When everything seemed utterly hopeless, Emma heard footsteps in the distance. At first, she dismissed them, assuming it was just a passerby, but the footsteps grew closer, stopping right in front of her. "Emma." She looked up, her eyes swollen from crying. Standing before her was Eleanor, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She was panting, holding a flashlight and an old umbrella. "Eleanor." Emma gasped, her voice breaking. "You foolish child, you scared me half to death. I've been searching everywhere for you." Eleanor knelt before Emma, her frail hands trembling as she touched Emma's face. "Why did you leave like that?" I didn't want to make you suffer anymore." Emma sobbed, tears flowing like a flood. Eleanor pulled Emma into her arms, holding her tightly as if afraid of losing her again. "Don't you understand, Emma? You are my family. I would never leave you, no matter what happens." The two of them embraced in the cold darkness, Emma's cries blending with the faint sounds of the night. Both of them trembled, but in Eleanor's arms, Emma felt a warmth she thought she would never feel again. "I've told you before, Emma, you don't have to worry. We'll get through this together," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Emma nodded, her tear-streaked eyes looking at Eleanor. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for leaving without telling you." "Don't say anything more. All that matters is that you're safe," Eleanor said, her frail hands radiating warmth as she held Emma close. The next morning, the two of them returned to the small café. Though life was still difficult, to Emma, it now felt like a true home. Eleanor began tidying up the café, carefully wiping away the dust that had gathered during their absence. Emma helped her bake pastries, her small hands gradually becoming familiar with the tasks. "I'll help you, Eleanor. We'll make things better," Emma said, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Eleanor smiled, her first genuine smile in days. "That's right, Emma. We'll be fine as long as we have each other. Nothing can bring us down." As time passed, despite the judgmental stares and whispered gossip from the neighbors, Emma gradually learned to ignore them. She focused on her work and caring for her baby, the tiny life growing inside her. The little cafe once again filled the air with its familiar aroma, drawing old customers back. Emma stood behind the counter, her eyes shining with hope for the future. "Thank you, Eleanor," Emma said, looking at the elderly woman who had been so strong for her. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Eleanor gently patted Emma's hand, her eyes filled with love. "You're my family, Emma. Family sticks together, no matter what." Under that small roof, the two of them lived a simple yet peaceful life, relying on each other to overcome life's challenges. 16 years passed since the night Emma left her father's mansion. Now she was a strong and independent woman. With Eleanor's help, she had overcome unimaginable hardships and opened a small restaurant on the outskirts of San Diego. The restaurant was named Hope, after her daughter, who had become the greatest pride of her life. Hope, now 16 years old, was a reflection of Emma's younger self, but with eyes full of intelligence and confidence. She often helped her mother in the restaurant, serving customers with a bright smile. Their lives were simple, but filled with joy and love. One morning, as Emma was cleaning the restaurant counter, a customer walked in. It was Julia, an old friend of Eleanor's, carrying a few old photographs from her youth. Julia, a cheerful and lively woman in her 60s, often visited to share stories and lend Emma a helping hand. "Emma, I found these photos while cleaning up at home. Look at how beautiful Eleanor was in her youth." Julia placed the photographs on the table, her eyes shimmering with nostalgia. Emma smiled and bent down to look at the pictures. "Eleanor was the most incredible person I've ever known. If it weren't for her, Hope and I wouldn't be here today." Hope ran out from the kitchen counter, curious about the pictures. "Is this Eleanor, Mom? I've never seen photos of her when she was young." "Yes, my love. She did so much for me and for you," Emma said, her voice warm. She gently stroked her daughter's hair, her heart filled with gratitude for the woman who had saved her during her darkest days. Suddenly, the restaurant doorbell chimed. Emma looked up and froze in place. An elderly woman with a frail figure, silver hair, and a face lined with wrinkles stepped inside. Her eyes carried weariness and hesitation, but deep within them was a familiarity Emma couldn't mistake. "Victoria," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. The woman nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, Emma, it's me, your stepmother." The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly grew heavy. Julia, sensing the tension, quietly stepped back. Hope looked at her mother, then at the unfamiliar woman, her eyes filled with curiosity but not understanding what was happening. Emma tried to compose herself, her voice colder than ever. "What are you doing here? After 16 years, you think you can just walk into my life as if nothing ever happened?" Victoria lowered her head, her voice hoarse. "I know I have no right, but I can't continue living with this guilt. I came to apologize." "Apologize?" Emma let out a bitter laugh, but tears began to well up in her eyes. "You threw me out on the streets without a shred of compassion. You chose your reputation over the stepdaughter who needed you, and now you think a simple apology can fix everything?" Hope tugged at her mother's hand, her wide eyes full of confusion. "Mom, what's going on? Who is she?" Emma remained silent for a long time, her hands clenched so tightly they turned white. "Hope, this is your step-grandmother." "Step-grandmother?" Hope said in surprise, turning to Victoria. "Is that true? Are you my mom's stepmother?" Victoria knelt down, her eyes filled with remorse as she looked at Hope. "Yes, my dear. I am your mother's stepmother, and I made terrible mistakes. I abandoned her when she needed me most, but I can't go on living without trying to make things right." Hope stepped back, looking to her mother with a bewildered expression. "Mom, is this true? Why did she leave you?" Emma bent down and embraced Hope tightly. "I'll explain everything to you, but not now." Victoria stood up, her hands trembling. "Emma, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends." "It's not that easy," Emma said, her voice filled with pain. 16 years is not a short time. I built myself up from nothing. You weren't there when I needed you. Now I don't know if there's anything you can do to change that." Julia, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma, your stepmother was wrong. No one denies that. But sometimes forgiveness isn't for others. It's to free yourself." Emma looked at Julia, then at Victoria. Conflicting emotions churned within her. Anger, pain, and a vulnerability she didn't want to admit. "Mrs. Victoria," Hope suddenly spoke, her voice clear but firm. "I don't know what you've done, but I think if you truly regret it, You need to prove it through actions, not just words. Victoria looked at Hope, her eyes glimmering with a faint glimmer of hope. You're right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. Victoria knelt down, taking Emma's hands in her own, tears streaming down her haggard face. I've lived with regret for the past 16 years, she choked out. Your father, he fell ill after you left. He never stopped agonizing over what happened, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. And now he's gone. Emma froze as though a storm had just swept through her mind. Father is dead? She asked, her voice cracking. Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why are you only coming to me now? Victoria gripped her stepdaughter's hands tightly, her own shaking. I didn't dare. I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. But when he passed, I realized I couldn't bear to lose you too. Emma, you're all I have left. Emma pulled her hands away, stepping back. All you have left? Do you think saying a few words of regret is enough? You and Father threw me out, and you turned your back on me for 16 years. I've had to survive on my own, raise my child on my own, and now you want forgiveness because you feel lonely? Victoria couldn't say anything more, her shoulders shaking as she wept. Hope stood beside her mother, looking at the scene before her with eyes filled with confusion. Mom, she called softly, her voice breaking. I don't know what happened, but maybe she really does want to make things right. At that moment, the restaurant door opened. Eleanor stepped inside. Seeing the scene unfold, she didn't say a word but quietly walked over. Emma, she said gently, her voice calm but firm. I think you need to let your stepmother finish speaking. But Eleanor, how can I forgive her? They pushed me into hell, and now they expect me to just let it all go. Emma cried, turning to Eleanor for comfort. Eleanor placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, her gaze soft but resolute. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting everything, my child. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the chains of hatred. Sometimes forgiveness is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Victoria knelt lower, her voice trembling. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness right away, but please give me a chance to make amends. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here for the present and the future. Emma lowered her head, the conflicting emotions within her swirling deeper. I need time, she whispered. Eleanor nodded. Of course, Emma. You don't have to decide right now. But remember, a family, no matter how fractured, can always find a way to heal. Victoria stood, her tear-streaked face carrying a faint glimmer of hope. Thank you, Emma. Just giving me a chance means everything to me. I'll do whatever it takes to show you I'm sincere. As time went on, Emma maintained her distance from Victoria, but she didn't stop her stepmother from getting to know Hope. Victoria often came to the restaurant, quietly sitting in the corner and watching Emma and Hope work. Whenever Hope laughed, Victoria would smile softly, her eyes filled with regret. One day, Hope tugged at her mother's hand, her bright eyes making it impossible for Emma to refuse. Mom, I think Victoria really regrets what she did. Can you give her a chance? I don't want to see you sad anymore. Emma looked at her daughter, her resolve softening. Hope was her greatest motivation, and if this could bring some peace to her child, she was willing to try. Eleanor played the role of mediator, often inviting Victoria to stay for meals or join conversations after work. Victoria, Eleanor said one evening as Emma cleaned up, you've hurt Emma deeply, but I believe with enough patience and sincerity, you'll have a chance to mend things. Victoria nodded, her voice hoarse. I will never give up. Emma is my stepdaughter, and I'll do everything I can to show her I mean it. A few weeks later, Emma decided to sit down and talk to Victoria. The conversation took place in the restaurant's small office after Hope had gone to bed and Eleanor intentionally left the two of them alone. Victoria, Emma began, her voice still cold but less sharp than before. I need to know why. Why did you turn your back on me when I needed you the most? Victoria lowered her head, her voice trembling with emotion. I was afraid, Emma. Your father and I were both terrified of being judged by others. We spent our whole lives protecting the family's reputation, and when it happened, we didn't know how to face it. But we were wrong, completely wrong. Emma stayed silent, letting Victoria continue. After you left, your father never smiled again. He lived with regret, but he was too proud to admit it. He would sit by the window, staring outside, as if hoping you'd come back. Then why didn't he look for me? Emma asked, her voice trembling. He thought you'd never forgive him, and I thought the same. But when he passed, I realized I couldn't go on like that. I couldn't lose you too, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. Emma sat quietly, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. She thought of the years of hardship, the cold nights spent alone, the time she stood in the rain with no one to turn to. But at the same time, she realized that no matter how much anger she held onto, the past couldn't be changed. Victoria, Emma said, her voice breaking, I can't forget what happened, but I'll try to forgive. For Hope, for Eleanor, and for myself. Victoria broke down in tears, pulling Emma into a tight embrace. Thank you, Emma. I promise I won't let you down. From that moment on, Victoria began helping at the restaurant, slowly rebuilding her relationship with Emma. Though there were still barriers between them, both made an effort. Hope became the bridge that connected them, her innocent laughter and curious questions bringing moments of joy. Months later, on a bright morning, the Hope restaurant hosted a small event to thank those who had supported them. Eleanor, Victoria, Emma, and Hope stood together, their faces full of gratitude and happiness. In her speech, Emma said, Life is full of challenges, but if we don't give up, we can find hope. I want to thank Eleanor, who saved me from my darkest days, and I want to thank my stepmother for not giving up on the chance to make things right. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she held Emma's hand. I'm so proud of you, Emma. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. But just as the celebration was reaching its peak, the restaurant door suddenly burst open with such force that the little bell above it nearly flew off. Standing in the doorway was a tall, imposing figure that made everyone in the room freeze. Richard Blackwood stepped inside, his usually pristine appearance disheveled, his tie loosened, his expensive suit wrinkled from what appeared to have been a frantic search. His eyes, usually cold and calculating in business, now burned with a mixture of fury and desperation as they scanned the room. Emma, his voice boomed across the small restaurant, causing glasses to rattle on the tables. Behind him stood Detective Morrison, a family friend who had clearly been helping with the search, and several other men in expensive suits. Emma stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. It had been 16 years since she'd seen her father, and now here he was, looking older but still commanding the same presence that had once intimidated boardrooms across the country. There you are, Richard breathed, his voice cracking with emotion. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I've had half of California looking for you. Victoria stepped forward, her face pale with shock. Richard, I can explain. Explain? Richard's voice rose to a roar that shook the small restaurant. Explain how you threw my daughter out of our home? Explain how you told her she was worthless? Explain how you let her wander the streets of Los Angeles while I was away on business? The entire restaurant fell silent. Even the hum of the coffee machine seemed to quiet in the face of Richard's fury. I hired private investigators, Victoria, Richard continued, his voice deadly calm now. I know everything. I know exactly what you did. I know every cruel word you said to my daughter. I know you threw her out when she was just 16 years old and pregnant. Victoria's face went white. She was being difficult, Richard. She was pregnant and bringing shame to our family name. She was my daughter. Richard exploded again. She was 16 years old. And instead of helping her, supporting her, you threw her out like garbage while I was halfway around the world closing a business deal. He turned to Emma, his expression softening immediately. Emma, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I should have been there. I should have protected you from her. I've been searching for you for 16 years. Emma couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Daddy? She whispered, the word she hadn't used in years. Yes, baby. I'm here now, Richard said, crossing the restaurant in quick strides and pulling his daughter into his arms. I'm here, and I'm never letting anyone hurt you again. He looked over Emma's head at Victoria, his eyes blazing with a cold fury. Pack your bags. You have 1 hour to get out of whatever place you're staying. Our divorce was finalized 15 years ago, but apparently, you never got the message that you were never to contact my family again. Richard, please. Victoria tried again, but he cut her off with a gesture. 1 hour, Richard repeated coldly. And consider yourself lucky I don't press charges for child abandonment and endangerment. As Victoria stood there, defeated and exposed, Richard held his daughter tighter. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry. When I came back from that business trip and found you gone, when I saw the security footage of what she did to you, I've never forgiven myself. Emma looked up at her father, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in years, they weren't tears of despair. I forgave you a long time ago, Daddy. I just wanted you to find me. I never stopped looking, Richard said softly, his voice breaking. Never. I hired the best private investigators in the country. I put up billboards, offered rewards. When Detective Morrison called me this morning and said they'd found you, he pulled back to look at his daughter, then at Hope, who was watching the scene with wide eyes. And this must be my granddaughter. Hope stepped forward cautiously. Are you my grandfather? Richard knelt down to her level, his stern businessman facade melting away completely. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your grandfather, and I've been waiting 16 years to meet you. Mom told me about you, Hope said softly. She said you were a good man who made a mistake. Richard's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Emma. You defended me? After everything? You're my father, Emma said simply. I knew you would have come for me if you'd known what really happened. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Mr. Blackwood, your daughter is the strongest, most amazing young woman I've ever known. She built this restaurant from nothing, raised this beautiful child on her own, and never once spoke badly of you. Richard stood and took Eleanor's weathered hands in his. Thank you for taking care of my daughter when I couldn't. Please, let me repay your kindness. Just seeing this family reunited is payment enough, Eleanor said warmly. As Victoria slipped out of the restaurant, defeated and alone, Richard wrapped his arms around both Emma and Hope. I have so much to make up for, so much lost time to recover. But if you'll let me, I want to be part of your lives now. I'd like that, Daddy, Emma said, finally allowing herself to believe that the nightmare was truly over. Can we go see your house, Grandfather? Hope asked excitedly. Mom told me it has a big garden and a swimming pool. Richard laughed, the sound rich and warm. It has whatever you want it to have, sweetheart. It's your house too now. And so, after 16 long years of separation, pain, and struggle, Emma finally returned home. Not as the frightened teenager who had been cast out, but as a successful businesswoman, a loving mother, and a daughter who had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from forgiveness and the courage to hope. The Hope restaurant continued to thrive, now with the support of the Blackwood family fortune behind it. But more importantly, it remained a symbol of resilience, second chances, and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Emma's story stands as a testament to the power of perseverance and the strength of family bonds. Even when everything seems lost, even when the world turns its back on you, there's always hope for redemption, healing, and love. And sometimes, the family that saves you isn't the one you were born into, but the one that chooses to stand by you when you need them most. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.